You've got to grips with the basics of gating and compression. You think your mixes are sounding good, but you're wondering what the secret sauce is to make them sound even better. Or maybe you've just always been curious about what the sidechain input does on a compressor or a gate. Using sidechain inputs can help you really tighten up your gating or give you more control over how your compression hits. In this video, I'll break down how sidechaining works on live mixers and give you 3 suggestions on how you can use it to get better mixes. If we've not met yet, I'm Andrew, I'm a live sound engineer, and if you're just at the start of your live sound journey, then I would suggest you check out my free PDF guide, 3 Steps to Perfect EQ. I'll leave a link in the description below this video. For now, let's dive in. Right, so how sidechaining works. Let's talk about what actually happens here. Normally, we know how compressors and gates work, right? You pick a channel, like, the vocal, and then you put the compressor on it, right? When the vocalist sings, you see the meters go up on the gate, or the compressor rather, and then you dial the threshold down. When the level crosses the threshold, so when the level of the vocal crosses the threshold, then the compressor activates and the vocal is compressed, right? Same thing for gating. You've got a kick drum, you put a gate on the kick drum, and you set the threshold. Whenever the kick drum is hit, the level goes up, it crosses the threshold, and then the gate opens and we hear the kick drum. That's normal compression and gating, isn't it? Sidechain compression allows us to use a second separate channel to trigger the gate or the compressor on the first channel. So for example, we would pick our compressor, right? Let's say we want compression to happen on the backing vocals, right? But we don't want the compression to kick in all the time in the backing vocals. We only want the compression to lower the backing vocals when the main vocal is singing. So we pick channel 1, our backing vocals, and we put our compressor on. And then we set the sidechain input of that to be the main vocal. Now what happens is when we look at the meters of our compressor on our backing vocal, channel 1, what we see is we see the actual level of the main vocal, channel 2, registering on those meters. And we are able to dial in the compression based on what we hear in channel 2. But the result is that the compression is applied to channel 1. The result, now the backing vocals are compressed when the main vocal sings, but they are not compressed when there is no main vocal. Same thing is true of like gating, right? We pick the channel that we want to open and close the gate on, that's channel 1. And then in the gating settings on channel 1, we pick sidechain input, and then we set the sidechain input to be channel 2, whatever we want to actually open the gate. Maybe that's like the kick in or the kick out, mate. More on that in a minute. And of course, the attack, the release, the ratio, all the other controls on compressors and gates, they work exactly the same, except they are applied to the signal in channel 2. Because remember now, even though our compression is happening on channel 1, the compression is looking to channel 2. So the attack time is based on what's happening on channel 2. The release time is based on what's happening in channel 2. Everything is happening based off of what's happening in channel 2, but the effect is applied to channel 1. So if, for example, we cross the threshold in channel 2 and we get 6 decibels of compression because we've gone, however many decibels past the threshold, then we would get 6 decibels of compression applied to channel 1. And nothing would happen to channel 2. Let's get very typically British with this, right? It's the rugby club's Christmas night out, right? And the rugby lads are sitting in the pub or wherever, and they're getting a bit rowdy, right? The bouncer is the compressor, and he is ready to turn down the rugby lads when their volume gets too high, when they get too rowdy. Been to the UK, this is very relatable. Normal compression. The bouncer is looking at the rugby lads, he's ready to turn them down when they get too loud. Rugby lads, and then the compressor, bouncer says, here now, no. Turns them down a little bit, right? Okay, that's normal compression because the bouncer, the compressor, is looking at the rugby lads, input channel 1, right? But what's happening is the president of the rugby club is going to go on stage 2-3 times throughout the night and then make a speech. So we still need to turn the rugby lads down. But instead of turning the rugby lads down when they get too loud, we need to turn the rugby lads down when the president goes on the stage. The president is now the sidechain input. The president is input 2. So the bouncer is looking at the rugby lads, but they're allowed to be as rowdy as they want because it's in the rugby club and who cares? But then when the president walks on stage and starts speaking, it no longer matters how loud the rugby lads are. The bouncer turns around and goes, shh, because the president has started speaking. The president has triggered the compression, the lowering of the volume on the rugby lads, because the president is the key input, the sidechain input for the compressor, which is on the rugby lads. Rugby lads, channel 1, where the compressor is. President, channel 2, the sidechain input. I said key input there. The sidechain input is often called the key input. It kind of depends on what mixer. Like I know Midas mixers call it like sidechain when it's compression, key input when it's gating. I think Yamaha mixers just call it key input for everything. Basically, sidechain input, key input, exact same thing. What about gating then? Let's talk about a metaphor for the gating. Back to the Rugby lads. They're turning up to the club where they're going to go in and have a Christmas night out. And there's a bouncer behind the door. The door is closed. It's not time to go in yet. So the door is closed, the gate is closed, right? Bouncer is the gate. He is deciding when the doors are going to open or not, right? Normal gating is the Rugby lads come up and they knock on the door. If their knock goes above a certain level, the bouncer hears it and opens the door. Rugby lads come in. That is normal gating. The bouncer is the gate on the Rugby lads, right? Channel 1 Rugby lads, gate, when they make enough noise, at the door opens, in they come. Sidechain gating would be that the Rugby lads turn up, they are input 1, which the gate is on, but the president is not with them, and the president is input 2, the sidechain input for the gate. They can knock all they want on the door, make as much noise as they want, but the bouncer is not going to open the door because there's not enough noise happening from the president, because the president is the sidechain input for the gate. Now the president turns up, the president knocks on the door, the bouncer hears the input from channel 2, the president, and then says, okay, I can now open the door to the Rugby lads, channel 1, and then they get in, right? I hope that makes some sort of sense. It's a half-baked metaphor, but it makes sense in my head. So basically, to summarize all of that, you put your compressor or your gate on channel 1, that is the channel you want to compress or gate, and then you select your sidechain input and you pick channel 2. That's the channel that you want the gate or compressor to listen to and make a decision based off of what's happening in that channel. That decision then affects channel 1. Let's talk about filtering a bit then, right? Because normally when we pick our sidechain input, right, we take that signal before any processing has happened to it. So basically the signal has been gained up, it's coming to the mixer, and then that is what we're listening to. That's what's triggering our compression on channel 1. But we can use a sidechain filter to actually apply a little bit of EQ to how we listen to that signal, right? We can pick what frequency range we are listening to. So here's an example. You've got a gate on your snare drum, but your gate is constantly triggered by the kick drum. And no matter how you adjust the threshold on that gate, the kick drum still triggers the snare drum. You can apply a sidechain filter to the gate on the snare drum. And what you do is you just essentially put a high pass filter on the gate and you roll away all of the low frequencies below like 250 Hertz. Now the gate is not hearing the low frequencies from the kick drum anymore, so it's not triggering the gate, opening the gate when the kick drum sounds. Now it will only open when it hears frequencies above 250 Hertz, and the snare, when it's hit, creates plenty of that to open up the gate. So you can do this on a sidechain input that is a different channel. So gate on channel 1 opens when sound happens on channel 2, but only sound above 500 Hertz. But you can also do what's called self-keying or self-sidechaining, picking the input channel itself as the source for the filter. So you can turn on your sidechain filter, keep the source as channel 1, so gate on channel 1, filter set to channel 1, and then you just raise that filter to get a clearer signal for your gate. If this has been useful so far, please subscribe to the channel. I've got loads more other stuff about gating and compression. And leave a comment down below and let me know what mixer you're using when you're mixing, and that way I can make more tutorial videos for those mixers. Let's talk about 3 ways to use sidechain filters then. The first one is ducking on ambience mics for in-ear monitors, right? If you're using in-ear monitors, it's a good idea to have a couple of condenser mics at the side of the stage, pointing at the audience, so that the artist can get a bit of a feel for how the audience is reacting. But if those microphones are on in the monitors all the time, the artist might be hearing a lot of spill from the PA. It might make their in-ear monitor mix a bit unclear. So you can do something like duck the ambience mics in the in-ear monitor mix when the artist sings. To do that, you would get your ambience mics, those channels, right? And you would turn your compressor on. You would turn your sidechain input on, and you would set that sidechain input to be the main vocal mic, or even better, if you can, set it to be a vocal group. You probably want a fast attack, a really, really slow release, so it's very, very gentle, and you probably want quite a high ratio and to set the threshold fairly aggressively. That way, as soon as the vocalist starts singing, those ambient mics get ducked down like 20 dB, 30 dB, and they essentially disappear from their in-ear monitor mix. But when they stop singing, those mics slowly creep back up into their in-ear monitor mix. Great. Second way you might want to use a sidechain input is on gating to get a cleaner source for your gate to open. Perfect example of this that I use is kick drums. So you want your kick drum out mic to open and close really, really cleanly when your drummer is playing that kick drum. But it's hearing a lot of spill from cymbals, from snare, from the bass amp around the corner. What you can do is use your kick drum in microphone to trigger the gate on the kick drum out microphone. So to do that, you pick your kick drum out microphone, you turn your gate on, right? You pick your sidechain input and you set that to be the kick in mic. And then you just dial in your compression settings as normal and adjust the ratio so that the inside microphone on the kick drum is triggering the gate. If you're feeling really fancy, you could turn the filter on and filter out any frequencies that are causing the gate to falsely trigger. But in my experience, like even just setting the sidechain input to be the inside kick mic gives you a super clean gate on your out kick mic, kick out mic, however you want to say it, words. A third way that you can try using sidechain filters is on your vocals to get a bit more control over the compression on that vocal. You want to pick your vocal, let's say your main vocal, and you want to put your compressor on. Your compressor might be getting triggered by all the noise that's happening on the stage and you want to zero in on your vocal. So you could turn the sidechain filter on, set the filter input to be self, to be the channel that you have just picked, that main vocal channel, and then you adjust the frequency of that filter to only open when it hears that vocal. And you can do that by setting it maybe to the fundamental frequency of the vocalist. You know, like 300, 400, 500 hertz will usually get you a really clean vocal compression. But a really interesting side effect of this that I find is that it changes the way the compressor behaves, right? If you're used to just turning on a compressor on a vocal and dialing it in, you will notice that the response is different to what you're used to. So why not turn it on and just play a little bit with the filter frequency and the filter slope and the kind of filter that you're using and see how that affects your vocal compression. That's all for now. Let me know if this video was useful. I'll leave a video up here with compression tips and I'll leave a video up here about getting the best vocal you can. Until next time, goodbye.